thank you all for coming to our Zillow Speaker Series, an uplifting, happy story about entrepreneurship and following your passion and your dream and your love of beer and trying to turn that into a business. So I hope you're all enjoying the product, either now or afterwards. We have Roger Bialous, the founder and CEO of Georgetown Brewing Company. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Roger. Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. So, small correction there, he was perfect until the last sentence. I'm actually a CFO and co-founder. There's also this guy named Manny who I started the company with. So, yeah, our story is a story of entrepreneurship. It's a story of a couple of guys who were in their late 20s and kind of had taken a few different roads to get there. So I'm going to start with a little backstory and then kind of talk about the beer and then sort of the business stuff. And then I think maybe Spencer maybe will ask a couple of questions and then we'll open things up to Q&A. Seems to be the way to go, so I don't bore you with things you don't want to know, and you can ask about things you might want to know. And gosh, there's beer right there, so you can't go too far wrong. I'm going to start talking about Manny a little bit. So Manny Chow is my business partner, co-founder of Georgetown Brewing Company. And he knew he wanted to be an entrepreneur, and he knew he wanted to be in the beer business from early on, borderline childhood, if you consider college childhood. And so, he got out of school and, well, actually, we'll start in school. He was a failed accounting major, turned into a marketing guy. Got out of school. You can interpret that however you wish. And he jumped into the beer business however he could. There's a little ale house called the Hop Vine over on 15th on Capitol Hill, and he cleaned it sometime between close and open the next day. That was one of his jobs. He worked at Liberty Malt Supply up the road here in Pike Place Market. And then he badgered some guys starting a new brewery back in the 96 called Malcolm and Jack, who started a company called Mac and Jack's. And so he went to work there. For them, he did sales, marketing, washed some kegs, washed some tanks, and kind of did whatever. Ended up being a sales and marketing guy purely, and really helped grow that company in over 5.5 years. Then had some differences with those guys about an agreement that he thought they had, and they didn't think so much. Or anyway, you can ask Manny about that someday if you meet him in a bar. But anyway, he got out of the beer business, ended up doing some work. He actually got himself Cisco certified, and then went to work at a sushi restaurant, which makes total sense. And I thought he might want to get into the bar business because he likes that, and part of why we are doing what we're doing today. And then at the bar, he worked at Nishino over in Madison Park, and anyway, he ended up meeting a guy who hired him to work at Omni Group, which writes some programs, does some consulting and contracting and stuff for kind of Linux and Mac-based stuff, and worked with them for a while. And anyway, that's kind of where he was when I approached him anyway about starting a brewery. I, on the other hand, didn't really know what I wanted to do at all. I didn't have this direction, beer, entrepreneurship at all. I was kind of more trying to figure things out. It was kind of pre-med, took the MCAT, did frankly pretty well, but somehow still did not get into medical school even after a couple of rounds of applications. So then I decided, what's messed up about the world and medicine is the administrative side of it. So I actually got a master's in health services administration, which is basically business school focused on healthcare. As there are some sort of moral obligations of that, which makes it different than a lot of regular businesses. And I ended up working at Premier Blue Cross for a while, and I sort of turned down Manny a couple different times when he tried to get me to go work with him selling beer at Mac and Jack's. So I did the graduate school thing, intending to work on the provider side in a hospital or in a clinic or something like that. my opportunities came in the insurance side, and that's probably what led to my rapid disillusionment with the health professions. So anyway, after working there for a few years, I thought, oh, I should look into buying a house and doing something responsible and adult like that. And then, it started sounding like a commitment that I wasn't sure I wanted to make, and that got me thinking about, well, needing this kind of income and how would I get this? Well, how do I like my job? And I'm like, dang, I don't really like my job that much. It's okay, well, what about a job or two down the line? And I'm like, wow, I think I might like those jobs, other than the paycheck, I might like those jobs worse. So what am I doing? So I kind of had this crisis of self and direction. And at the end of the day, I'm like, I got into this because making people healthy was cool. And now I've got this job doing business stuff for this large corporation that isn't really, it's a few steps removed from actually healing someone, or, I think we can all agree on that. And it just wasn't for me. And to kind of fix that administrative side isn't really being in the business of healthcare, it's being in the business of politics, and that's a whole nother discussion we can have. I have some pretty strong opinions on that, but we're really talking about beer. So anyway, I didn't like my job, decided not to buy a house, so I've got a little chunk of change, but focus on the little. And so what can we do? And, I kind of thought, oh, do what you love, right? People say that all the time. Maybe I should take that to heart. For me, that was beer and fishing. And I didn't really want to make fishing a job. I didn't want to, make that impure. I like that too much. I love that too much. But I could see kind of making a living out of beer. And I'd worked in bars, and working at a bar as a bartender is really fun. In my early 20s, but I think you have to be a special person to do that for your whole life. To me, it's a lot like theater. You're on stage, you have to perform. You don't get to be grumpy at your desk, working on your computer or doing whatever. And I'm just like, yeah, as fun as that has been for the years I've spent pouring beer in bars, don't want to do that. The distribution thing didn't appeal to me. But creating a product and bringing it to market in or as it turns out, our vision, held a really strong appeal to me. Kind of identifying a gap or a need in a market that maybe didn't see that there was a gap there. They didn't know that maybe this is something that they would want or enjoy. So anyhow, I'm like, this is attractive to me. On the other hand, I know next to nothing about making beer. I'm a hack home brewer who knows everything I know about brewing beer from brewing beer with my roommate, this guy named Manny, who also happens to know the Seattle beer scene pretty well from having spent 5.5 years working at Mac and Jack's. And despite the fact that he never brewed a drop of beer there, he's actually a pretty talented brewer. So took him out for couple of beers and kind of propositioned him, and I said, hey, you're unhappy in the restaurant thing, you're not really happy, at least at the company you're with now. We've been talking about business ideas for as long as I've known you, and you said you were burnt out on the beer thing, but I don't believe it. I think you were burnt out on Mac and Jack and that scene, and I think that, you say the beer business is hard, but as most people know, every business is hard. Maybe you're lucky and you get in, you're one of the first players to get into a space, and yeah, it's easy because there's no competition. Well, how long does that last? Other people see what you're doing and they start diving into that space as well, and next thing you know, it's as competitive as anything else. So anyway, we decided to write a business plan, kind of figure out how we would fit into the craft beer, micro beer space, and then actually do our product development on the homebrew system. And if we felt like we had a product that competed, we would, and the finances made sense, we would go ahead and pull the trigger. So, we did our analysis, the market and what it was, and it's great because it's so easy. You just call the state and say, hey, can I see the reports for who's sold what or who's sold how much in the state for the last year? And they just mail them to you. It's awesome. So, you can see like, oh wow, as far as the craft brewing, like there's 7 companies that just dominate the market right now. And it wasn't split between draft and bottles or cans. It was just, and it wasn't split up by individual beer brand. It was just the brewery. But you don't have to know too much about craft beer to know that for the most part, breweries really sell one beer. Like Red Hook sells ESB, and Pyramid sells Hefeweizen, and Widmer sells Hefeweizen, and Alaskan sells Amber, and New Belgium sells Fat Tire Amber, and Sierra Nevada and Deschutes sell pale ales. And so, you kind of know, you're like, wow, these 7 beers are really what is dominating the market. So if we can make a beer that we feel competes with one of these, that's awesome. We could maybe be in that group someday. And so then we were like, we drink a lot of beer. And in fact, we're pretty enthusiastic about a lot of beers. So let's think about those. What are those beers and why do we like them? And then take that one step further and like, as much as we love them because they're awesome, would we do something differently if we were to make that beer? And so, fortunately the answer was yeah. Like as far as styles, both of us had been started out kind of the same, like drinking porters and ambers and malty stuff, and it kind of like zoomed to the other end of the spectrum, and we're drinking IPAs and kind of turbo IPAs, but it's sort of settled down into that happy place as far as we're concerned of like Pilsners and pale ales. So like Pilsner being the hoppiest of the golden lagers, pale ales being, and I don't mean this in a negative way at all, but kind of a middle of the road ale. There's some hop character, there's some malt character, but it's really balanced. And one of the things Manny learned working at Mac and Jack's is, if you are lucky enough to be working at a brewery that sells a lot of beer, it's probably going to be one beer, and it would really be nice if you really liked that beer because you're going to be drinking a lot of it over the next several years. And so, as opposed to doing, to building a beer around what we thought some consumer might like, we designed a beer around what we would like, and then asked the question: is it reasonable to expect someone else to like this beer? And then we looked at it and we're like, yeah, well, it's more or less a pale ale, and these other pale ales are doing really well, and it's kind of a core beer style, and gosh, this is really kind of cool because the 2 pales that are in that list of 7 breweries that are dominating the market are not from here. They're from Bend, Oregon and Chico, California. And while there's nothing wrong with that, there's something to be said for being the local kid, and so that ended up being like the core of our business model, was being the pale ale from Washington for Washington. And, I don't know, I like to think we've succeeded to some small degree, and I'm not sure if that's because of or in spite of, the decisions in our analysis of the market and whatnot. But I think that being, targeting that style, which is what we like, as a, go-to day in, day out, I don't want something weird, I just want a beer, has really kind of worked out. So there's that. Then we went, and it actually kind of freaked people out, to be frank. So I was our sales department for the first first couple of years. And I'd go into a bar, and I'd have a growler of Manny's Pale Ale and say, hi, I'm Roger from Georgetown Brewing Company, and we make this beer called Manny's Pale Ale, and I'd like you guys to check it out, know what it is. And, I'm very much a soft sell, kind of informational sort of salesman. And, I can't tell you how many times people would say, like, yeah, we're good on Pale Ale, what else you got? I'm like, well, nothing. They're like, what do you mean? Like, you're out of samples? I'm like, no, this is what we do. This is all we do. And for the first couple of years, that was true. We made one beer in one size keg, and that's it. And people are like, you're gonna fail. Like, you can't succeed. Like, there's no way. And I'm like, well, maybe. I don't know. Like, we sort of think there's something to be said for this model, and they're like, no, you're gonna fail. I'm like, well, let me try it, and so then they'd try it, and, they're like, oh, it's actually pretty good. And anyway, as it turns out, things worked out, and so that's, I think one of the things I like to talk about is, we were, a lot of people looked at the market when they heard we were talking about starting a brewery, and they're like, "You're crazy. You missed the boat. That ship has sailed. There's already, all these breweries that I mentioned already, and many more. And if, you haven't established a brand already, you missed the opportunity." And we just thought that was kind of crazy. I see your point, but I disagree. So maybe crazy is the wrong word, but I think that what those founding fathers of the beer business sort of did, the Burt Grants and Gary Fish at Deschutes and Paul Shipman at Red Hook and the Widmer Brothers and Fritz Maytag down at Anchor, and there's a bunch more, but anyway, like what those guys did in the beer business is a lot like what, oh man, why can't I remember the Starbucks dude's name? Howard Schultz, thank you. Like what he did in the coffee business, and I'm sure there was some others, but around here, like he was kind of leading the way and really did a fantastic job getting people to like want flavor in coffee and to get people to be willing, flavor and texture, and to get people to be willing and happy to pay for that, and they used to like slide a quarter across the bar, or put it on the table and drink coffee, bottomless coffee, as long as they wanted, And he's like, yeah, we're gonna charge dollars, not cents for coffee, and you get one. And when it's gone, you can throw a few more dollars on the table and get another one if you want it. But he turned people onto this idea of paying for coffee and having flavor in coffee. And those, founding fathers of the craft brewing movement here in the States, they weren't the first people to make flavorful beer, but they were the first people to make flavorful beer in America since Prohibition, And they got people willing to pay more for a glass of beer and to want and expect flavor in a glass of beer. And so they broke a lot of trail for us in that respect. And yeah, there's established competition. They have set the bar, but they've also broken all this trail, and they've got people interested in trying new things and willing to give new beers that they've never had before a chance because they want that flavor experience. So, when Manny and I looked at the market, we looked at it as not having missed an opportunity, but like someone has actually created an opportunity. And that opportunity was actually further enhanced by the fact that in the kind of mid-90s, late 90s, there was actually a little bit of a sussing out of breweries. Like breweries weren't opening anymore, they were closing. So there was a lot of used equipment available. I mean, part of the reason, one of the go, no-go decisions we had for starting the brewery was, one, can we make a beer that we feel competes with these big 7 beers that are dominating our local home market here in Washington? And two was, can we do it on our own dime? Because we want complete control. We don't want somebody who's interested in quarterly profits. Like, that's not how we think. We're in this for the long haul. We don't have to make $1 gazillion for a gazillion shareholders. Like, it's you and me. Like, that's it. And if we can pay our mortgage and put food on our table, like, we're okay. And we don't want to get pressured into some situation by a shareholder. I mean, going public was not an option, but like, even with, silent partners, if they're not seeing a return on their investment they want to see, sometimes they're not so silent anymore. And we just didn't want that pressure. So fortunately, Manny owned his home. That was a great thing at that point in time. Because if you had it for like 2 years, you had like a whole ton of home equity. So like the debt portion of our financing came from he and I co-signing on a home equity line of credit on the home he owned. I'm like, I didn't own the mortgage, I didn't own the house. I just shared part of the obligation to pay back this HELOC that we used to start the company. And then, my chunk of down payment, my down payment that was gonna go for my house. And then I have no idea where he came up with his chunk of money to start the business. But, so we're like, okay, we're self-funded, we can do this our way on our timeline and position it for, we're not interested in selling out and, amp up the value and cash out. Like, this is our deal. Like, we like doing this. Like, we love this. So I think we're fortunate that way. I feel both of us feel extremely fortunate to get to do something we love, like every day, go to a place we love, work with people we love, and do cool stuff like that. That's really all we wanted, and it's become actually so much more than that. We're fortunate. So anyhow, had this control and we can make these decisions, and stuff was cheap. That's the other part of the contraction of the beer business. Like, we bought $250,000 worth of brewing equipment for $23,000. Like, that makes it a lot easier to bootstrap stuff when you're buying things for a dime on the dollar. So we were fortunate, and I'm just psyched that we were courageous or foolish enough to and we didn't see it any other way. The first time we looked at starting a brewery, that's just how it was. And we're like, you know what? That's pretty good. Like, this is a great opportunity. Like, now really is the time to strike. Like, we need to do this. And so, anyway, speaking of, getting things going, like, the next thing that happened was Manny got fired. So we're like, geez, now what do we do? And so, when we had a basically complete, we had a full-on Death Star business plan. It was not complete, but it was operational. And, like, what are we gonna do? And like, should Manny be looking for a job? And we decided to go the other way. We decided to compress our timeline and have him do whatever looking for a job you have to do to keep those unemployment checks rolling in that we've been paying into that system for a long time now. And anyhow, thanks for that. That's the crowdsourcing we did to make that happen in the pre-Kickstarter era. And so anyway, that's what we did. We compressed the timeline, found a great space down in Georgetown in a historic brewery. We were the first brewery, the first legal licensed brewery in not the original Rainier Brewery. If you're from here, it's not the one you're thinking of. It's the one further south, just north of Boeing Field, that was Six Seattle Brewing and Malting. It's where Rainier and a number of other brands were brewed before Prohibition. Then there was Prohibition, and after Prohibition, they built the brewery that's got the Tully's T on it now and used to have the Rainier R on it. So we were in that original building, got 2,500 square feet, ended up annexing a little over 9,000 by the time we left there. Now we're a half mile north of that, still in Georgetown, and have a bigger brewery, and that's going really well. Looks like it was, looking back now, it was a total no-brainer to buy that building and, buy a bigger brewing system and take that plunge. But anyhow, yeah, so we went from doing the one beer for a couple of years to adding beers slowly, one at a time. The second beer was Rogers Pilsner, me. The third beer was Chopper's Red. So like I said, it was just Manny and me. We actually took on a minority partner because he'd been an invaluable asset as a consultant and a friend, but a friend of ours is a mechanical engineer and has experience doing stuff like building out breweries, like Red Hook, things like that. Turned out to be really useful for us because we don't have that knowledge. And that's another thing I talk about. I always cringe when I hear about a brewer starting a brewery with another brewer. Like, dude, that's the last thing you need. You need a business guy, you need an engineer, you need complementary knowledge and skills. Like, you don't need to clone yourself. Like, what? That doesn't help anything. You need another perspective to help make better decisions. Anyway, so Brett Chop is the chop that is Chopper's Red Ale, which is also on tap over there. We have a Pilsner, or a porter we do year-round called 9-pound porter or Georgetown porter, depending on who you ask and depending on who's threatening to sue us. And then we have an IPA now called Lucille that's actually it's finally eclipsed. Oh, it didn't take long, actually, but it eclipsed the Pilsner to be our number 2 selling beer, and it's delicious if you're into the IPA thing. And so now we do all these other beers, which has strayed from our original business model of, one beer, one format, simple. But honestly, like, we use these things, like, not trying to displace our Manny's handle, but to be in addition to the Manny's handle. And people are like, oh, what's that? And the beauty of it is it's working like we hoped, which is that bartenders or servers or whomever, your friend who drinks beer and knows about this stuff says, oh, that's from the guys who make Manny's. So it actually, like, ends up promoting the Manny's brand, that we make things other than Manny's and they're actually pretty good. So that's cool, and it gives us variety, so you don't have to just drink Manny's all the time, which is handy. And let's see, control, quality geography. Like geography-wise, like we tried to focus on Seattle first, which seemed to make sense. And actually within Seattle, we focused on neighborhoods first. So like if you live in Fremont, you go out in Fremont, like we want to be on at El Camino and the Triangle and the Red Door and Nectar and Norms and everywhere you might go in Fremont. So, what we wanted is for people, if people actually found our beer and liked it, so that they could find it again and start identifying themselves as a Manny's drinker, because that's how most people drink beer. Like they have a relationship with a beer, and this is they're like, I drink Manny's, or I drink Mac and Jack's, or I drink Budweiser, whatever your thing is, and they have a short list, if they can't get that, they have a couple of fallback options, but you want to be that, and if they have Manny's here and Rogers there and Choppers here, like you can't fall into that rhythm of, your go-to beer, you can't find it. And so that's a large part of the reason we started with one thing. And also, as good a brewer as Manny is, he'd never brewed commercially before. So we figured minimize variables, minimize ingredient inventories, minimize finished beer inventories, because it's all the same thing. And it just gives us an opportunity to like focus, do it better, learn how to make that one beer, and we can add other things slowly from there. And then we'd plant seeds, just start selling beer only in like kind of ale houses in Tacoma and Everett and wherever, where people go and are adventurous. The people who go to these kinds of bars go there because they want to drink a beer they've never had before, and then they tell their friends who are a little less adventurous perhaps, like, no, seriously, check this out, you're gonna like it. And it kind of grows from there, and that seemed to work out pretty well. And, today, I guess, the other part of our, like, sort of one more thing I guess I really want to touch on before we let questions start flying really is kind of a sense of community. One of the things that we do or don't do as a company, which I believe works for a really locally focused company like ours, is we don't advertise. I mean, there's a couple exceptions to that, but it's really to support businesses that we want to support, like Northwest Brewing News. If you drink at ale houses, you see this little free every 2-month periodical that the only people who read it have had our beer before. They know exactly what it is, but we think it's good for the industry that exists. So we were going to buy advertising space and give them money so they continue to exist. And what we really do for advertising is give away beer or give away discounted beer for your kids' school fundraiser, Like maybe you're doing, I don't know, what do you call that thing where you sign up and you got to raise a bunch of money and you get to go to a marathon in Dublin or Hawaii for free. The team in training, right? Leukemia Lymphoma Society, I'm pretty sure. Like you got to raise money somehow. So you throw a kegger in your garage, charge your friends $20 a cup, and that goes to raising money for Leukemia Lymphoma Society. Fantastic. So we really wanted word of mouth advertising and word of mouth like marketing and that kind of grassroots level stuff, and we didn't think you get that by buying radio spots or TV spots or print media spots. And there's a lot of like sort of street value of beer, as it turns out. And so you can, people call us all the time asking for donations for this and that and the other thing, and we say yes as often as we can. And that's both giving back to the community that supports us, support the community that supports you. Goes around, comes around, it's a great thing. And it gets our name out there, the people that we support, say nice things about us, And I don't know, again, like I'm talking to them like I know what's going on, but it's, so far so good. It seems to be working out, either in spite of or because of what we think we're trying to accomplish. One other question I'll head off at the pass is why we don't bottle or can beer and you can't find our beer in grocery stores.
Answer that question.
I will answer it. And this is, again, I don't know if we're missing the boat here or what, but so we are actually technically the second largest draft-only brewery in the country. Like we're millimeters behind Mac and Jack's right now, who is the largest draft-only brewery in the country at present. And I think part of the reason that Mac and Jack's presence on draft in the local area because they sell beer in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. We've been selling beer in Washington and Idaho, and just Labor Day went down to Oregon for the first time. And we think that a fair amount of their longevity is the fact that it's hard to get their beer. Like, you can't have a refrigerator full of Mac and Jacks unless you go somewhere that sells growlers, like the brewery. And it's a huge pain. It's pain to get their beer in your fridge at home. Maybe you have a kegerator, you can do that thing. But that's not normal. Sorry for those of you who have kegerators. Most people do not have a kegerator at their house. Or perhaps you have one at work, which is fantastic. But I think that part of the reason people buy a Mac and Jacks or a Manny's or any of our other beers or any of their other beers on tap is, when they're out at a bar or restaurant, is that they don't have a 12-pack of it at home because they can't buy it at the fridge. And so the novelty of that beer persists, it continues. And it's weird looking at it. I mean, it would be a huge investment for us to have a brewery capable of making enough beer to do that and have the bottling or canning line or whatever to do that and have all the inventory and it's a major investment. I mean, probably not in the kind of dollars your company is used to speaking in, but for us, it's a pretty big deal. And at the end of the day, we're like, gosh, you do that, and well, where's that money come from? Do you take in outside money? Is it debt? Is it equity? As I said, we're kind of control freaks and not really that into the equity thing because then someone else thinks they have a say in what's going on. And so we just said, hey, we're making a good living. We have a good lifestyle. We have great people that are continuing to grow and have opportunities within our company, which is important to us. And this is okay. This is okay. I think our brand has longevity because of a little scarcity, actually. Especially for those of us who, well, I'm different because I drink beer every day for work, but for people who used to go out, say, a lot in their 20s or early 30s, and then some, catastrophic event happened, like the birth of a child or something, and, next thing you know, you're not going out boozing a couple nights a week, So, it's hard for us to lose those customers because, those are the ones who really, right? I know, and it's hard. It's hard, and so that's and we can talk about that. I think maybe you should talk to Spencer about when you get off work. Really, I think maybe that's the other side of that coin. Pretty darn close, yeah. So for those of you who don't know, which is, I'm guessing, 95+% of you, well, most of you know that there's a lot of hops grown in the Yakima Valley, which is just 2.5 hours east of here. And what most of you probably don't know is that that's 75 to 80% of the domestic hop crop, which represents about 25+% of the world hop crop. So, a lot of you were probably aware of how significant Washington is in the wine world. Well, we're actually even more significant in the beer world from a growing perspective, from a ingredient perspective. So we get our hops there. Our malt, 98%, 99% of our malt comes from a maltster in Vancouver, Washington. And they source their stuff from Oregon, Washington, Idaho. Every once in a while, Canada, but pretty rarely. Most of our specialty malt comes from Brees, who malts in Wisconsin. So that's really the one thing. Our yeast we get from a lab, or it's actually our yeast, but the lab that takes care of it is down in Odell, Oregon, which is Hood River. It's a suburb of Hood River. And so, yeah, we're pretty darn local. And our water is good old Duwamish River water. No, just distributors are, so kind of one of the things we've decided to do is really keep our business model very simple. So there's a lot of businesses or potential businesses in beer from beginning to end. You can have the farms. Yeah, we're not going to do that. You can make the beer. Yes, we're going to do that. Distribute the beer. It's a business. It's a whole business. There's a lot of smaller startup breweries in particular do self-distribution to kind of get going, build a brand, and make it attractive enough generally for a wholesaler to pick up, because you need a lot of cold storage to hold that kind of inventory. And you need a huge staff to really provide good service to your retailers, like bars and restaurants, because you need to like have salespeople in there, taking orders, and then you need delivery people out there filling orders and picking up old kegs, and they all need like cars or trucks to drive. And so all of a sudden it's really expensive to actually be a brewery and be a distributor. And it's the same reason we also don't have a bar or a restaurant, like a pub, at our brewery. Like we are a brewery, that's what we do. We aren't restaurateurs. We aren't publicans that run a bar. We don't do that. We don't compete with that. And I think that's one of the reasons bars maybe like to sell our beer, is that we can tell this very clean story. We're like, dude, if people don't go to bars and drink beer, we don't sell beer, because we're not in grocery stores, And our brewery is like in this out of the way neck of the woods down in South Seattle, and that's not convenient to very many people. So yeah, there's people coming in and buy growlers, but like if they aren't going to bars buying beer, like if they aren't coming into your place buying beer, they're not buying our beer. And so our fortunes are really married together, and I think that resonates with a lot of those people. So. Actually, no, which is, again, I feel extremely fortunate to say that. I mean, like, the times I remember is like, the giddiness of like deciding to actually do it, opening a checking account, opening a corporate checking account, signing our lease, signing to get our equipment, to get that used equipment, which was, anyway, another story. Like, I remember after like 2 months of soldering pipe and hammer drilling concrete and building the brewery, like driving north on I-5 at midnight, to get home so like I kept my day job for a while. We signed our lease in September of '02. I didn't quit my job until, we signed our lease September of '02, got our equipment in October, did our first brew in December of '02, sold our first beer in February '03, so we're just coming up on 10 years of sales. And I didn't quit my job until June of '03. So anyway, like I had to, I worked a lot, like by my standards, like 80 hours a week. It's a lot for me, I'm kind of lazy. But I remember like driving one day, like north on I-5, headed towards downtown, and just seeing downtown and the lights and everything, and just like for the first time really feeling like a part of this city, like we're gonna be a part of this city. Like I'm building a business here. Like, I mean, I've lived here for years, but I've been a resident, and I just felt connected to the city in a way that I never had before. And we hadn't brewed a drop of beer, let alone sold a drop of beer yet, but like I just could feel that, sense that coming. And like I have more stories like that than stories of fretting. Like, I mean, the stuff we've tried has worked. We didn't come to market with this one product that nobody wanted to buy, or put it on tap and it didn't sell. And we have a few stories of it not selling, and then we went in a year or 2 or 3 later and it sells fine. But, I mean, like, I don't know. We don't have those tales of woe and hardship and, kind of freaking out. Like, do we stick to our guns? Do we stay the course? Or do we make a tack and like start pushing a different product? We haven't had that issue, so lucky. So we described in words, it took about a page and a half to talk about the malt profile, the hop profile, the aroma, the mouthfeel, the carbonation level, like kind of the color, everything about this beer, every way we could sense this beer, what's going to look like, what's going to smell like, what's it going to taste like. And then we were in a hurry. We were impatient, so home brewing kind of takes a little bit longer than commercial brewing. And so we started with a base recipe that Manny developed. I've had a little bit of input, but really Manny developed this recipe. He's like, this should be close. And so then, instead of waiting 3 weeks to get results for what happened, we brewed again the next day, changing one variable, like changing the bittering hop, or changing the aroma hop, or changing a malt thing. And so we had this notebook, we still have it, of like very detailed tasting notes on each of these, because we'd brew like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 times before getting the results, getting actually to taste that first batch. And so anyhow, it ended up being, gosh, like 15. I think it was like 15 where, I mean, a lot of these, like, you know, we poured a half a pint, you know, we poured like that much beer. And, okay, let's taste it, you know, pour it, taste it. You know, oh, what do you think? Oh, this, that. And like, we didn't even finish the pint. We just opened the keg up, dumped it out right there. We were done, you know, like, okay, know what we need to know. Have no desire to taste that any further. And like, so the batch that we tasted right before Manny got fired, like, no kidding. I didn't swear, excellent. No, the batch that we tasted before Manny got canned, like Manny looked at me and he said, "What do you think?" And you know, I mean, I thought a lot of things, but the first thing I thought was like, I think we're going to be rich. You know, and then I went on to deconstruct it a little bit and critique it a little bit, but like, I'm like, dude, we're close. Like, this is so close to what we want to do. And anyway, next thing you know, he's fired, and we're like, that was close enough. Like, if we can do that, we can get it the rest of the way, and let's go, baby. Like, let's do it. That's a fantastic question. And in this, while a little bit of that does happen, is actually illegal in the state of Washington. And that's one of the reasons you see the flourishing of the brewing business and the wine business here, because those kinds of buying business sorts of deals, not to make it sound like an evil thing, it's just, it's illegal in our industry. And that goes to blue laws back in Prohibition and tied house stuff, and we can talk about that if you want. But at the end of the day, one of the major reasons you see so many small breweries here is because you can't buy business like that. People do, but it's rare. The pay-to-play stuff doesn't happen, so people tend to buy the beer more on the merits of the beer. They tend to buy wine more on the merits of the wine, and you know, we're super fortunate for that. I think, you know, I mean, I love the fact that I get to drink beer in Washington every day. I drink our beers, I drink other people's beers, you know, and other people's beers are what got me really excited about beer, you know, well before I even started homebrewing, let alone own my own brewery. You know, and when I travel to other parts of the country, you know, I try to do my homework and figure out where you can get good beer there, because there's good beer everywhere. But it's not as easy to find as it is in Washington and Oregon and like San Diego and a lot of other places. But, you know, it's there, it's just hard to find. There's not a market for it, and it's in large part, in some places it's in large part due to the buying business stuff you asked about. You know, I soft sold. I went in, I said, hey, this is our beer. If you're ever looking to shake things up in your draft lineup, like, I want you to know about us. Like, we know about you, we'd love to sell beer here, but you know, when it makes sense for you. And, you know, last thing I want to do is tell someone how to run their business, you know. Last thing I'm going to do is tell them they're not going to survive unless they've got Manny's Pale Ale on tap, because they've been doing okay so far. I have drunk with him.
He always talks about you on the radio.
I have talked with him. Andy is currently our sales rep for Seattle. He was our Eastern Washington, Idaho guy for many years and just took over the Seattle market. And Andy's pregnant wife, Janie, drove John Moffitt home from a bar back in May. We had our Bob's Brown Ale event at the Nickerson Street Saloon. And we know John and some Seahawks because of a guy Manny went to college with who, like, takes care of the grass out at the VMAC. He's I don't even know what you call, but he like went to college to learn how to grow grass, and his grass is kick-ass. And they also take care of the field at CenturyLink Field. And so anyway, he's like, hey, you guys want to come to, you know, mini camp? Like, yes. And so anyway, we got to meet a few of those guys that way. And so John comes to some of our events because he likes our beer, as he says all the time, which is awesome. And I'd love to have Mr. Moffitt as a spokesmodel. It'd be great. A 320-pound man, perfect. Like, that sells beer, I tell you. But anyway, like, yeah, he's a character. He's a really funny guy, and he loves beer. He's serious about it. He tries different beers. Like, he's really a student of beer, as much as he's, you know, a young man and likes to, you know, cut loose a little bit too. But we pull for John. None. He actually never saw the recipe at Mac and Jack's. They kind of keep stuff pretty close to the vest. And like I said, he never brewed a drop there. And perhaps you remember me saying something about like making sure you like the beer that you make, because you may end up, if you're lucky, you're going to be drinking a lot of that. And as it turns out, like as much as we liked ambers as we were younger, both of us, and I was Manny's friend for a long time when he was at Mac and Jack's, like all but like a month. I met him about a month after he started there. So I have also drunk a lot of that beer, and I kind of grew away from that style, and not just Mac and Jack's, but ambers in general. And so, anyhow, we were kind of actively, we've never actually made an amber ale. And I don't think we ever will, like largely just because of that question. I think it helped a lot. I think in the like alehousey places, I don't think it mattered much, because something different, something new, like they're all over it. It got us into like some of the like more touristy places, because when you're a tourist, you come to Seattle, like okay, Seattle, coffee, wine, beer. Airplanes, apples, I don't know, like, why do you think of Washington? What do you think of when you think of Washington? And so I think, and like I do when I go to Oregon or California or Colorado or Montana, like what do you got local? Like what's the local brewer doing? And so anyway, like waterfront places, airport type places, Safeco Field is a great example of really doing an awesome job supporting local. So it's helped in a lot of places. Frankly, Manny's contacts and experience and reputation from his days at Mac and Jack's helped us open a lot of doors earlier than they would have opened otherwise. That's why I put in considerably more money than he did. Not so much as a dollar figure, but as a percentage. Because I was buying his experience, he brought more to the table brewing specific than I did, and market specific than I did. So. Going to Idaho totally doesn't matter. Going to Oregon matters a bunch. Like I was born in Oregon. I have a lot of family in Oregon. Manny actually went to high school in Oregon. He has a lot of friends down there. Oregon's a lot more provincial than Washington. We're pretty open to good product. Whether it's beer, wine, or anything, kind of regardless of where it's from. We hired a guy, like the market, like I said, with my history there and Manny's history there, the market's really important to us and we want to succeed there. So part of the reason we didn't go down there until we'd been selling beer for 9 years is that we wanted to be able to afford to hire a guy and put him there and have him live there. So he wasn't just going down every couple months and trotting through the market with someone from our wholesaler. But he actually lived there and became a part of that scene, and gave us a chance to succeed in a tough market for breweries from Washington. And, I'm kind of curious how long it's going to take before he pays for himself, And I'm curious. Like, I don't know. We're happy to make the investment because we really care about the market. It's an important beer market, and it's personally important to both of us. So, being the pale ale from Washington for Washington, at least we like to think we are, has its upside, but it also has its downside when you leave your home field, Yes, so we started with one, again, I described some of the advantages of having multiple brands, but I'd like to take back to some of the other things I described as well and put the focus on them, which is that, we targeted like specific markets, like micro markets within Seattle, like say Fremont was really popping in the in the early 2000s. And, we wanted to have Manny's Pale Ale, the same beer on tap at every bar in Fremont if we could, which is hard to do when you can't throw money at it. Like that guy asked earlier, one of the moved. But anyway, you want people to be able to develop a relationship with the beer. Like one of my experiences in my formative years of underage drinking in bars in college was, I lived a couple, 2.5 blocks from a bar called E9, Engine House Number 9 in Tacoma. And yeah, South Side. Anyway, they used to be an ale house. They're a brew pub now, but they used to be an ale house and they had all these beers and they poured a lot of Oregon beers. See, welcoming beers from other places, not xenophobic. And at one point I was there and they had 4 beers from Full Sail on. And Full Sail at the time was branding their beers. All their handles looked the same. They had a different color background. They had a nice kind of parchment colored Full Sail. And then it said Full Sail Amber, Full Sail Pilsner, Full Sail Lager, Full Sail Golden. And, you know, I tasted them all while I was there. Weird. And then, like, the next time I went back, I'm like, son of a bitch. Like, did I like the golden, the pale, the lager, they all kind of sound the same, and I couldn't remember which one it was. And so they're kind of on one end of the branding spectrum, and then the other end of the branding spectrum is like New Belgium. So like a lot of people have never even heard of New Belgium brewing. It's not so much true these days, but like 5-10 years ago, it was very true. But they knew exactly what the hell Fat Tire was, you know? And they order a Fat Tire, they know exactly what they're getting, because they're ordering the beer brand, not the brewery brand. And so somehow like Deschutes has found a really magical space where they have a very prominent brewery brand, but they also have really awesome beer brands. You know, you order a Mirror Pond, you know it's from Deschutes, but you know, Mirror Pond is the beer you like, you know, and you may or may not know it's a pale ale, and that's cool. But you know, to order a Mirror Pond, you're gonna get what you wanted. You order a Full Sail and you have no idea. So I don't even remember the question anymore, but like, there's that. Sorry.
Roger, you've got 60 thirsty people in Orange County where this is being webcast who say, please expand to Southern California because they want your product down there. Thank you very, very much. Congratulations, and we look forward to drinking more of it.
Thank you. Yeah.